So in this video, I'm going to be going over the configuration screen for our poker game, which is the centerpiece of our entire site. Now there's going to be a lot of options on the config screen. I don't want you to get overwhelmed by them. They're really all there for one reason, to help you get better at PLO in the quickest way possible. So all the options are going to be centered around helping you play fast, play in a realistic setting against human-like opponents who are going to make the same kind of mistakes your real human opponents are going to make. And of course, you're going to be able to get advice while you play and then quickly address your trouble areas to improve in the fastest way possible. So let's jump right into it here and take a look at the config screen. Okay, so over here on the top left of the config screen, the first thing we can pick is what table we want to play at. Now this is going to control the difficulty level of the opponents you're playing against. They go everywhere from very easy opponents who are going to make a lot of mistakes, play kind of crazy, very loose, some of them way too aggressive, and all the way up to the toughest level, which is the hardest level. We worked using a solver. They're going to play a lot, they're going to approximate a solver strategy, especially pre-flop. They're going to be really tough to beat at the hardest level. So you choose whatever level is appropriate for you. Maybe you want to work your way through the levels. You can also select what blinds you want to play at over here, but I want to point out that whatever blind level you're playing at does not control the difficulty of the opponents. Only the table you pick controls the difficulty. So you can choose to play at $1, $2 blinds or 2-5 blinds, whatever you normally would play at your local card room. So, but that's just for your comfort and whatever chip sizes you're used to, but that does not control the difficulty as it would in a real poker room. Obviously, in a real card room, as the stakes go up, the opponents are going to get tougher and tougher. But here, that's not the case. It's the table which actually controls the difficulty. Now there's a little box up here that says no theme. What that means is when you click that, all the avatars of your opponents are going to disappear, all the background images, all the distractions on the screen are going to disappear. So if you don't like all the noise on the screen, so to speak, just click that no theme button and you'll get a dark background and no avatars, and it'll be a very clean look to while you're playing. Here you can pick the number of chips you want to bring to the table. You can bring up to 150 big blinds. And if you press this Configure Opponent's Chips button, you'll see you can go in here and pick how many chips you want your opponents to start with. And then the drop down below that will ask you whether you want all your opponents to start with exactly that many chips, or if you just want that to be the average number of chips your opponents have, but their chip sizes will be kind of all over the place. And finally, below that, there's a box that says, when do your opponents reload? Do you want your opponents to reload their stack again when half of their original stack is gone? Or do you want your opponents to go completely bankrupt before they reload their stack? Okay, so back to the main screen again. There's a little description below that of what table you're playing at. Now let's go down to the members only options at the bottom here. The first one is player mix. Now, generally you're going to want to leave this on average for this table, but if you'd like to play against opponents that are more passive than normal or more aggressive than normal, you can change this drop down here. So now some opponents are naturally going to be more aggressive. Remember, there's 50 different opponents you're going to be playing against at these different tables. Some of them are naturally more aggressive than others. This is going to, in general, make all of the opponents even more aggressive than they normally would be, or more passive than they would normally be. There's also one option here which says unknown hidden opponents. Now if you select that, you will not be able to see the description or the names of your opponents at all. And so you can use that if you want to simulate being in a card room where you had never met anyone before and you don't want to have any reads on them whatsoever. This next button here is to set up your advisor. You can click the settings button and it takes you to another screen here where you can pick one of 10 different advisors. Now, once you've picked an advisor, there are 3 different options. You can have it only show advice when you actually click the advice button in the poker game. We'll see that later. You can have it show advice no matter what at every single decision point whenever you're faced with a decision. or you can have it show you advice only when you pick an action that's different from the advisor's action. So you press the call button and the advisor would have actually raised or the advisor would have folded. It'll only show you advice when it feels that you're playing it differently than the advisor would have played it. There's a note here at the bottom. It says, please note, on each hand, once you make a decision different than what the advisor would have recommended, you will not get advice anymore after that point for the remainder of the hand. This is very different than on advancedpokertraining.com, our No Limit Hold'em site. For those of you that have used that site, you know you can press advice at any point during the hand to get advice. The advisors think very differently on OPT here. In a nutshell, they're always thinking about hand ranges. They need to know exactly what hand range you are representing. And as soon as you've made a decision on a hand that is different from what the advisor would have done, he or she cannot give you advice anymore because they just simply don't know what range of hands you're holding anymore. They only know what range of hands they would have been holding in their preferred lines. So that's going to take some getting used to, but on the later streets, if you would have played the hand differently at any point during the hand on the earlier streets, the advisor simply will not be able to give you advice anymore. But you still will be able to look at your opponent's ranges, and we'll get into that in the advisor and show range button, which is another one of the videos you'll want to watch here. Okay, moving down here, we've got positions to deal. Generally, the button is going to move around the table just like it would in a normal poker game, but if you want to here, you can freeze the button, as we call it, and you can have it deal you always under the gun, or always on the button, or always in the blinds, something like that. So you can choose that here if you want to practice from a specific position at the table. And below that, we've got what hands do you want it to deal. Again, generally, you're going to want to just deal all different kinds of hands, but if you'd like to speed up the game even faster, you can select playable hands. It's not going to deal you any of those complete junk garbage hands that you're going to have to fold. It's going to deal you playable hands all the time. You can even pick a specific category. Now, here on OPT, we use 76 different categories to categorize all PLO starting hands. And if you don't know what those categories are, there's a little question mark here. You can hover over it and you can click on this link and it'll take you to a list of all the different categories. And you'll see the categories include whether the hands are double suited, single suited, rainbow. Then they've got things like pocket pairs, double pocket pairs, double suited connecting hands and rundowns, that kind of thing. So you can look at this list here and you see every category has a number next to it. So let's say, for example, I only wanted to play these double suited rundowns. That's category 5. Well, actually, let's say I wanted to play category 1, which is double suited connected Broadway hands, and category 5. So I remember 1 and 5, and I go back to the other screen here and I actually type that in the box. I type 1, 5 in the box here. Or if I wanted to play all categories from 1 to 5, I type 1-5 instead. That would only deal me hands from those first 5 categories. So if you want to practice with a certain hand type that you're having trouble with, this is a great way to do it here. Now remember, the question I'm always asked about this is, you guys keep statistics on other pages. Won't this mess up my statistics if I'm always dealing myself rundowns or always dealing myself pocket aces here? The answer is no, this won't mess up your statistics because we don't include hands in your statistics, that hands where you dealt only a specific kind of hand, or hands where you froze the button and let's say only dealt yourself from under the gun. We don't include those in your statistics to avoid skewing your statistics on the other pages. Now, if you really want to include them in your statistics, you can go into their reports, your reports, and there's actually a checkbox for that, but I'll cover that when I go over your reports. But in general, these are not going to mess up your long-term statistics because we don't factor these in. Only if the hands are totally dealt randomly do they factor into your statistics. Okay, let's keep going. Got a button here for allow peeking at your opponent's cards. On OPT, you can peek at your opponent's cards if you want to see if your read was correct, something like that. But if you want to avoid that temptation altogether, you can just uncheck this box here. You could check this next box if you don't want it to save your hands and statistics this time. As you know, every hand you play on OPT is saved forever right into your own personal online database. But if you don't want your hands saved, you can click this box and then all the hands you play in this session will not get saved. This next box here is if you want to start each hand with the same number of chips. So say you brought 300 chips to the table and you wanted on every single hand for your, when you go to the next hand, you want it to reload your stack to 300 chips exactly. Even if you won a lot of chips on the hand or lost a bunch of chips on the hand, your stack will always reload to exactly 300 chips or whatever the number of chips was you started with. And next here you can set up if you want to use a 4-color deck. I really like using a 4-color deck. I know a lot of online players use 4-color decks, although they're not very common in live card rooms. I've only been to one card room where I actually saw them using 4-colored decks here in Florida. Okay, but you can use a 4-color deck if you want there. Finally, there's these action timer options here. Let's go in here. This, as you can see here, if you want to use this, it's by default, it's not configured, but if you check this box, you can turn on the action timer. And this will be just like a shot clock that you see in some poker tournaments now. This will give you 30 seconds to act or however long you want. If you're an online player, you know you usually only have 30 seconds to act on your hand. And often on a lot of online card rooms, they also give you a time bank. So here you can see in these other options here, you can configure the time bank. Maybe you have 30 seconds to act on each hand plus a 2-minute time bank. You put 120 in here to have a 2-minute time bank. The time bank, of course, for those of you not familiar with it, that you only get one time bank for the entire session. So if you, it's kind of like in a tournament, sometimes they give you these little plaques you can cash in for an extra minute to think on certain hands. You may have seen that on TV. So that's what your time bank is here. It's extra bonus time you can use up when you have a really difficult decision to make. And finally, at the end here, it'll ask you, when you run out of time, do you actually want your hand to be folded as it would be if you were actually playing online poker, or do you want it to just warn you that you ran out of time but not actually fold your hand? So again, you don't have to use the action timer at all, but if you want to make sure you're acting in 30 seconds or a minute and not thinking too long about any particular hand, you can set this up, and it makes the game a little more exciting if you want to kind of put pressure on yourself to always make your decisions quickly. So you're welcome to use it if it suits you. So that's about all for this screen. In the next video, I'm going to continue. We're going to hit the submit button down here. We're going to go into the actual poker game itself, and I'll go over all the options you're going to find in the poker game itself.